Okay, I guess everything is working. Hey guys, how's it going? How's it going? I'm not gonna be on for too long, I don't think. It's been a long week, and I'm very tired. But I figured I'm not really doing anything else right now, so I'll go ahead and continue working on some Warhams. Today, I decided to do something a little different. I have a Judiciar from an old Indomitus box that I bought myself a couple years ago, and I really don't like the paint job that was on him, so I'm gonna go ahead and repaint the lad, and I've already started doing so, and I already much prefer the current paint job that he's got going on. But yeah, we're gonna see how he turns out. So how's that? So let's go ahead and remove the starting soon button, and I suppose we'll get to it. Let's see, what have we got here? So this is where we are with him so far. The light is way too bright. Can I turn that down? Is that a little bit better? No, not particularly, though it is helping me see the colors. That's one of the things that I'm going to continue fighting with, is just figuring out what is good light and what is good focus for this guy, so that he's clearly visible on stream, but also, you know, bright enough so that I can make out detail. So when I originally painted him, I just kind of made him a an Imperial Fist color. He was just a lot of yellows, and I kind of blocked him in and then did a heavy shade, and that was it. And honestly, that didn't look very good. He wasn't a unit that I ever felt like I wanted to play or needed to play, and he just kind of sat in a box. So I figured that I'd go ahead and give him once over and try and hit him again, so that A, I could actually put him on display and be proud of him, and B, if I ever decided to take my Imperial Fists into heavier melee territory, I'd have a very frightening, angry guy to lead them into it. So I'm still kind of debating what color I want to make the rest of his breastplate, because keeping it all black is a little bit boring color-wise, and having it the yellow that I had it didn't do the armor much favors. So I'm kind of at a loss of what color to make that last little bit of his chest plate. I'm thinking of potentially doing a really strong silver and seeing where that will lead us. And if I were to do that, that would mean kind of giving it a base coat of black, or maybe like a good solid blue, a good solid dark blue, and you know, building up volume from there, and eventually getting it to this really brilliant, bright, polished silver. Though that would also require me to do some more non-metallic metals, which I will be completely honest with you guys, I have been practicing quite a bit on, but I still don't feel immensely comfortable working on, because my understanding of light and reflection and shadow still is not the best. But you know what? If I don't like it, I'll just paint him over again, right? So I think that's what I'm gonna do with him. Give him a nice silver breastplate, which means for this part I probably ought to make that silver too, right? I initially brought out a dark brown onto my palette to give him a really heavy golden color right there, and I was thinking I was going to make the breastplate like a leather brown, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to go silver and keep it a little more monotone. And at the same time, the more I look at it, the more I realize that I don't think I shaded in his head enough. He's incredibly pink. I don't know how well it's showing up right now, but I feel like he could be much, much more fair-skinned. Because right now he just... Actually, I guess him being that angry does make sense. I'm actually pretty tickled by just how much it looks like he's wearing goth eyeliner because of how I did his eyes. And I think the gloves are going to have to be like a leather brown. I'm just kind of thinking about this guy out loud. Now, something I had always heard, which I probably should be better about personally, especially when you're trying to do like a display level mini, is to plan out your paint job. Plan out how you're going to paint the mini. Because if you just go into it willy-nilly, unless you're following a very specific scheme, you're going to run into the issue that I'm running into, where you're just not sure how to advance. But that's okay. This is a personal project. I'm just painting things for the fun of it now, as my summer kind of winds down. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to stream as much as I wanted to. And kind of rebuild my viewership, but that's a whole nother story, and that's fine. And I'm not going to worry too much about spilling paint over onto his gauntlet, because it's going to get covered over anyway with a much darker color. Okay, that's about as good as that's going to look, I guess. That's a robe. That's his robe. I got to figure out what color I want to paint his robe. But for now, does he have any more? He has another purity seal. I might paint his robe the yellow, because I think it would make sense for him to wear a yellow robe since he is of the fists. But at the same time, I think like a burnt orangey goldy yellow robe, an Imperial Fist colored yellow robe, would look not good. You know what I mean? So I don't really think I want to go that way with his robe. What I am gonna do is, I think, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go back over the spots I've left plain with a black, and that should allow, actually no, not a black, I forget. Now here's the next question. Should I go with a really, really dark blue, or should I just go with the baseline of this deep blue that I've got? Because normally, when I'm doing metals, I'll add a little bit of the deep blue to a black, and that will get it down to a really nice black with just the blue, a slightly blue hue, which works nicely for shading and building up a black to a highlight. But I've never tried it for silver. So what I think I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to go with just the deep blue, and we'll see how that turns out. Okay, there's some of that deep blue all mixed up and whatnot. Very nice. Go ahead and take up some of that on the paintbrush. And so this is going to be an interesting problem to have. Because again, this is not a color I've really ever tried to paint before. A non-metallic metal silver. I usually have it sticking to non-metallic metal golds in my painting of the Custodes, which I'm still not done with, but that's okay. That Combat Patrol is slowly getting more and more units ticked off the list, until eventually one day I'll finish the dang thing, realize I don't want to play it, and then sell it all. That's fine. Okay, got a little bit of that blue on some of the darker black, which is a-okay, because where'd it go? I could have sworn I got more of it on there. This is kind of why you do your darker colors first, because if you make a mistake on them, they're not that difficult to kind of correct with the darker color. If you try and do a lighter color first and then a darker color over it, it's going to be a whole lot harder to fix that mistake when you go back and clean up your model. Just a little thing to be aware of when you're painting your own guys. Okay, on to his breastplate. Now, I don't think on the sculpt this is actually a separate piece, but the way it kind of is raised and separated on the front really lends it to what I'm going to do to it. Really lends itself to how I'm going to paint it in a minute. So hopefully this ends up looking okay. I suppose we'll see. Okay. I go gently over the whole thing. I don't know. Still debating on what color I want to make his robes. He is supposed to be a branch, not of the ecclesiarchy, I don't believe. My lore for 40k is not the best when it comes to actual 40k. I know a decent amount about 30k because I've read so many of the damn books, but 40k is a little bit of a mystery to me still. Hopefully I didn't mess up too much of his face in doing that. Nope, that looks pretty okay. So, I suppose we'll find out how good this looks as I start adding more white to that. Now, add some brown to some of his little trinkets and reliquaries he's got on him. I really should just make an offline playlist of my favorite songs from Epidemic, since I've pretty much downloaded all the ones I really like, and just use those and let those run constantly. Now, for the belt buckle, should I go ahead and make his belt buckle silver, or should I make it more of a non-metallic metal gold so there's some pop? I think it's going to be gold, because he's going to be very two-toned otherwise. The ribs down there that I did in that bone color, that khaki color, they're supposed to represent, like, the skeletal aspects of the armor that chaplains tend to wear. So those ones are going to stay fairly bone colored. I think that's how I'm going to reconnect it back to the chaplain look that he's based off of. Because that was something I noticed when I was looking up pictures of him, is that that's what they'll do with him, is they'll give him that that bone colored riblet, which is a funny way of putting it, I think, on there. But yet, let's go ahead and get some dark brown here. And I suppose I should do that on his pouches too. And we'll see how that looks with whatever color robe I end up giving him. I think it might have to be the Imperial Fist yellow, because otherwise he just doesn't look very Imperial Fisty, which is kind of a funny way of putting it. But that is a problem, is that for the most part chaplains and the like, they really don't look like their chapter, because they're wearing you know, the standard issue black with the one shoulder pad that denotes what chapter they're from. So yeah, I'm gonna have to mess with that a little bit. I think I kind of want to make this guy first company, since he is supposed to be kind of a champion. I don't know. I've done a little more deep diving once I decided to separate out my captains, because I have like 3 or 4 captain models, and, well, I think 5. I have 5 captain models, and they're all painted. They were all painted to be third company, which is yellow with red trim, and that's just because I like the look of third company. But having that many captains for one company seems silly, so I went back to the Codex supplement for the Imperial Fists, and I looked up what colors each of the companies are supposed to have, and it looks like first company is supposed to be wearing white or silver, and like fifth company I think wears black. And actually, that's not a bad idea. I think since I'm painting the rest of him silver, it would make sense to go ahead and well, no, paint his robes white. I don't know, that might look a little strange. I don't know. I'm still gonna waffle on it for a bit. Okay. I think for his gloves, I'm gonna go with a leathery brown. And actually, I might even change my mind on that. I think I might even go like a magenta, which I was very stunned to find out one of the ways you can make magenta, I think it's magenta is the right color. Might be auburn or something, but is with a red and a brown. It gets you that nice, like, rich color. And that was not what I was expecting when I was first trying to mix magenta for something else. I don't remember what it was. But yeah, it was very strange finding out that red and brown are the two colors that go to make this kind of rich purpley color. So let's go ahead and do that. Mix ourselves for some red and brown. Before I do though, I think I'm going to hit the purity seals. Because this man clearly loves him some God Emperor. There we go on there. And there we go on here. This is some Vallejo Deep Red. Okay. I don't know. I've considered keeping his coat white, but I think that would just be silly. Or his coat, this overspray color, but I think that would just be a little silly looking. But yeah, it looks like it does. I could go up from to a bright yellow with that thing. I don't know. I'll look up later. I'm probably not going to get that far. I'll look up later to see what color robes a chaplain should be wearing, if there is a specified color doctrine for them like there is for everything else. I'll check out what the heavy metal team did for their version of the chaplain. Maybe another layer of this, because this seems to have gone on fairly thin, but it came on beautifully matte. Which is kind of exactly what I wanted. And there we go. And then I can slowly build up from that with a white. The one glove is now well painted with the orange. Oh, wait, no, I want to paint that with a burgundy, that's right. Oh yeah, it was to make Sivens, it was maroon. That was the color I was thinking of. It was for my, the Warthog that I made out of the Invader ATB. So it dulled down the red enough to make this really interesting version of red. Which I kind of appreciated, because that's not how I would have thought to make something like maroon. But it creates this like rich wine color. And so I think that's what I'm going to do for this guy, is give him some really strikingly reddish brown gloves. And that'll hopefully break up a little bit of the monotony of the fact that he's wearing all black armor. And a ring, apparently. In fact, it's kind of strange knowing that he's a power armored space marine, but he is wearing primarily, or he's not wearing any armor over his gauntleted hands. He's just got gloves, which is not at all normal. But this is a really neat looking unit. He was a ridiculously powerful character in some ways in 9th edition, is my understanding. I don't believe he was ever like a character you would take to a tournament, simply because of his limited use case. But I could see him being a problem. I think he made the enemies fight last, or they couldn't fight first or something. And in melee, his Executioner Blade was extremely powerful for a small dude. Though I don't know if, like I said, I don't think he was good enough to warrant taking over some of the other units from 9th edition that the Space Marines had. Especially since they weren't that good. I could do his entire armor in like purple and maroon. Or his entire coat. That might be interesting. But I really don't know. Next, I suppose. I'll go ahead. I think I'm going to silver up his pauldron. That's something else, is he's not wearing a pauldron on his left shoulder, which gives him enough room to kind of crook his arm, or crook the Executioner Blade to rest on his arm. for the longest time after initially making him. I thought I messed him up and I thought I forgot a piece. But yeah, he does not have a, he doesn't have a Space Marine pauldron on that arm. And I think it's entirely because he's fighting with that giant sword. Okay. Let's see if I can squirrel this in here without getting it in too many other places. I will say something I do like about Scale 75 colors is that they run beautifully off the brush. I haven't really had an issue with them feeling watery or overly runny or anything. They just very smoothly come off the brush onto the plastic, and that's pretty nice. Or onto the medium that I'm using. Okay, let's see. Can I get that last little... Yes, I can get that last little bit. And I've only got the one pauldron to do, so eventually I'll hit the rest of that with a yellow to represent the Imperial Fists, and it'll look okay. Maybe one more thin coat of the maroon. Because right now, his left gauntlet looks a little wimpy. It looks a little bit too thinned out. And then I can start hitting it with some highlights to build it up to a lighter color. Without hopefully desaturating it. Okay. I'll go ahead and paint in the handle too with a darker brown, which I'll then build up too as though we're wrapped in leather. And that'll work in my favor. Now for the sword itself, I'm debating what I want to do with it. I think it's just going to be a straight metal sword, like no energy field. Because it doesn't look like the weapon actually has an energy field. I think it is legitimately just a big, heavy sword. And so I think the furniture is going to have to be gold, just because gold reads best. So let's put some of this on. And work our way towards a non-metallic metal, shall we? Get a little bit of it up high. Hopefully the camera will focus back in. Very nice. So apparently, Games Workshop now just has a database on their Warhammer community website with all of the downloads for all of the different documents you might need to play 10th edition. And this allows them to just upload new versions of the documents, and then people can download them at their leisure, which I think was a fairly smart choice, to be honest. I think they did a good job of making sure that the rules are for the most part accessible and easy to find. And they even dated each of the documents to say last updated at X time, which I think was incredibly useful. Okay, now, again, I gotta figure out what to do down here. I'll also look at some of the fun ways that people actually paint up those hourglasses that he has. Okay, I think everything for the most part is painted to at least a neutral tone. Maybe, mayhaps I can start kind of leading in with the brown. So let's get some of that brown out of the pile. And let's start highlighting some parts on the belt that can push the brown a little further. A little further, a little brighter. Let's see what we got here. There we go. got to get enough layers on that darker base coat to actually pull out some of the really pretty coloring. Because otherwise it just doesn't do much. And that's a bit of a problem. Go ahead and get some more of that. And now I've got a baseline of brown to work off of that I can then move into a yellow, which will then allow me to do the non-metallic metal stuff. So let's get to work on that. Mix up my yellow for me, which I think is actually called, yep, gold brown. Which is funny because it's very much, it's like close to Imperial Fist yellow, like that orangey yellow, but it doesn't have the actual orange tint to it. So next, we're going to kind of skip a step because I don't want to spend the next 4 hours painting some gold onto his belt, right? So now I'm going to, first of all, clean out my brush a little bit. It had way too much paint on it. I'm going to go ahead and just paint some yellow on the spots that the light would probably reflect off best. Same with the skull. There's some spots where the light would reflect. And since this yellow is very thin, it's most likely not going to go on with incredible coverage the first or second try. You're going to have to actually do a couple layers to make it all work out. So we're just going to dab a little bit of yellow in between the gaps to show some reflective light inside. Get a little bit of it down underneath the belt. Hit the bottom of the belt. Hit the top again. And you can see it's getting increasingly yellow the more I work on it. Well, you could if it wasn't blurring in and out. And I think because most of his hips are in darkness due to how his robe is covering him, that's about as far as I'm going to get on the gold there. And I think, I don't know, should I make the skulls on his silver armor, what's going to be a silver armor gold? I think I'm going to go ahead and make those gold. But before I do that, I should probably hit the hilt of the sword. And what I can do with this is eventually build it up to what would be considered a traditional shine on the Mini. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm still kind of learning how to do this. This is my time to practice. This is where I can get my experience in working on these non-metallic metal things. So please don't be overly surprised if I'm not that good at it yet. I'm going off of kind of what I've learned and some of the tutorials I found online. Because painting gold hard. Let's see, what have we got going on here? Got that. We got that. Okay. Unfortunately got a little on his shoulder, but once again, good evening, Red. How's it going? Since I painted a dark color first, when I go back over him with the dark color to clean everything up, that's going to be completely unnoticeable. Okay. Let's see, gonna go ahead and stab a little bit of it in there, get some coverage. Get some coverage there too. And now, the gold is going to start showing up because it is going on top of a layer that is not just straight dark brown. Not bad, thanks. How's mine and the missus? It's going okay. We found out today that one of our favorite restaurants is closing due to owner's health, which really sucked. But later on this evening, we are going over to a friend's house to play some board games. Which is always good. She got to go to a concert, I think last weekend, and had a really good time. So, everything's going pretty okay. The cat that we adopted seems to be doing fine. His biggest issue right now is he's starting to get a little feisty in the bathroom that we've kind of quarantined him in. But within the next, I think not the next week, but the week after that, we'll be able to take him back in for a checkup and find out whether he has any diseases that might be dangerous to our current pets. So, things are kind of moving along at the Benry Paints household. Right now, I'm just working on repainting some of the characters from the Indomitus box that I don't like the paint job of very much, and trying to improve it, make it look better, and that way I can feel these guys are worthy of display once I eventually get a, you know, display case for them. But that's many moons down the road. We're running a little short on money now that we're getting closer to the end of summer, and my summer funds are starting to run out. But once the school year starts back up again, we can start doing some cool stuff around the house, which is what we're both looking forward to. Something we've been meaning to buy, but it keeps getting kicked down the road, is a new screen door. The one that our previous homeowner left on there is kind of an embarrassment, and the bug screen is all kinds of punctured. So we're looking to get a really nice, more energy efficient one that would allow our cat and our dog to look outside and see the neighborhood without letting in a whole lot of hot air. Hey Pyros Requiem, how's it going? Welcome to the channel. How have you been? Only paint I've come close to over the week was Emulsion. I'm not even sure what that is. I'm assuming it had nothing to do with painting miniatures though. I recently finished not a huge project or anything, but I have a friend who, he plays 40K with me, but he's been playing with a lot of unpainted miniatures because his current job just leaves him too exhausted to do anything, and rather than lug the mini, and he lives in a small apartment, so he doesn't really have a whole lot of space, so rather than lug the minis to and from his apartment, he's just kind of left them at my place decorating. That's what I figured. And so they've been unpainted for, at this point, a couple of years, which is sad to say. But, I decided that since he's kind of having a hard go of things, that I would go ahead and paint up some of his models for him. And, he told me specifically, please don't paint these ones, I want to paint them myself. But, I finished up painting a lot of his, a lot of other models that he either really likes or wants to use. And I gave them a somewhat consistent basing scheme too. So hopefully, eventually going to get my first set, but want to watch people paint. That's fair. This is a great time to get into the hobby because Games Workshop has spent the last, like, 5 years making a ton of mistakes and then doing everything they can to learn from those mistakes. Not everything, but pretty close to it. They finally found a way to streamline the game enough that getting into the game is not prohibitively expensive anymore. The new starter set, for example, comes with 2 armies that, just as they are in the starter set, make up 2 combat patrols. And yeah, what kind of army are you thinking about getting? Because I know the starter set kind of limits you and puts you right into Tyranids and Space Marines. But those definitely aren't bad places to start if that's where you, or if you're undecided. Age of Sigmar, even better in a lot of ways. I don't have the monies or time or friends to get into Age of Sigmar since they all are pretty well stuck in 40K budgetarily. But I'm loving everything that I'm kind of seeing coming out from Age of Sigmar. They have a really cool lore and they've got great looking models. I'm really jealous of how good some of the armies look. And actually, what army are you going to play in Age of Sigmar? That seems like a good follow-up question, so that's the one I'm going to ask. Because they have so many neat-looking armies there. Sylvaneth are really cool, yeah. I keep finding myself staring at those models over at the local game store. Mainly interested in paintings. So, Gloomspite gets. Those are fantastic models. I tried to start up a Nighthaunt army until I realized how expensive it was going to be to start up a Nighthaunt army. So I was looking to try and get the Soul Wars box just to have a decent setup. And then I couldn't find the Soul Wars box because I think I was like 2 years too late. And so I ended up buying the Tempest of Souls box, which I think was the mid-range starter box. And I painted them up, and then I realized none of my friends were going to get into Age of Sigmar, so I kind of gave up. And now they're just sitting in like a little tray that I have. Around that time though, I found another game that was considerably easier to learn and play than 40k. I want the woman standing on the giant beetle. That would be amazing. I love how incredibly fun the models are for Age of Sigmar. And one that I actually really wanted to get, an army that I wanted to get, but I kind of never pulled the trigger on it, was the Ogor Maw tribe, just because I think they're really cool and really funny. And I was hell-bent on learning skin tones and how to paint them at the time. And someone apparently had ordered a Christmas box, one of the Christmas Battle Forces from a few years ago at the local game store. He never showed up for him. So I kept telling the owner I'm eventually going to buy him when I have some extra money. And over this last holiday, he had a Christmas sale where he gave you kind of a hint of what was wrapped inside the box. So it could be like, you know, zombie board game. And it would give you a price, which was typically like 50% off the price of the actual game. Or Age of Sigmar army. And one of them was very clearly the Ogor Maw Tribes box. And I was like, I'll think on it over the weekend. And unfortunately for me, someone bought it before I could get it. Though to be honest, I don't think I would have had fun trying to paint an Ogor Maw Tribe army's worth of skin tones. All you need is some glue and a set. I've been told brush cleaner is good as well. Yep, all of those are really, really good. Brush cleaner will keep your brush tips very nice and pointy. Tamiya glue, like Red said, is probably the best you can get. And it's really, really worth the price. It's what I use. It actually melts the plastic together. And doesn't stick to your fingers in the same way that super glue does. You would only need super glue for any resin-based miniatures from like Forge World or from 3D printed miniatures if you know anyone who would do that for you. Tamiya glue is by far the best option. And so that's definitely a route to go. You said you need some glue in a set. And of course, if you wait long enough, there's most definitely going to be some holiday boxes again. You might be able to collect like a full army of Gloomspites for like 50 or 30% off if you wait that long, or if you're willing to wait that long. Okay, I think for my limited leather abilities, that's going to be fine. So I only have a small base layer brush. Is that good enough to start? Yeah, it's fine. I will say that Games Workshop brushes are kind of expensive for what they are, so if you have that already, then cool, you're good to go. That's actually what this is. I think it's a small base. And up until I kind of ruined the tip, it was good for almost everything. But now the tip is kind of flattened out, and so precision painting is kind of difficult. But for something like, you know, this model or a little smaller, it's great. If you ever decide you want to get into like the hyper detailed part of painting, which is where I am, I'm trying to do like all sorts of major little details no one's going to notice unless they pick up the mini and thoroughly inspect it, then you'll want to get better brushes. But for starting off, it's not a bad place. Okay, what else do I do? Leather looks good, that looks good. I think maybe make that look a little more metallic, so I might actually go ahead and go silver with Wait, is he visible? He's visible. What brushes would you recommend for budget? For budget brushes, you can go to any hobby or craft store and pick up a couple of ones and zeros for like $5 a brush, and those will serve you perfectly fine. You don't really need to get much better than that unless, like I said, unless you're going into really, really detailed models. And that way you can kind of learn how to use them, ruin them without feeling too bad, buy more if you need to. From what I saw, not the Artificer, I forgot the names of the brushes. The white-handled brushes that Games Workshop sells, they're not too expensive. Yeah, Army Painter's got great dry brushes. Games Workshop brushes are by no means bad. I don't want to sell you on that lie. Games Workshop brushes are pretty good. They're just generally a little overpriced. Is my personal experience with them. I don't want to invalidate the way that Red paints, because he's a darn good painter, and so clearly the tools are good enough for what he wants to use them for. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about being elitist with brushes. That's a waste of everyone's time. But at the same time, if you don't have a lot of money, don't think that you only can use Games Workshop brushes. If that makes sense. But yeah, if you've got any other questions, I'm pretty sure that both of us would be glad to help you. Mr. Red's been in this hobby a lot longer than I have. And he's a really good guy, so he knows a lot more about it than I do. I got really into it a couple years ago and found a love in the painting aspect. I'm dog shit at the actual game, but I do have fun whenever I play it. I saw Army Painter has a starter set in Most Wanted. Yeah, you can get that. Army Painter's brushes aren't terrible. I think my only problem I've ever had with them is that I tried to buy one of their Masterclass brushes, which is made from a really nice... It's supposedly made from a really, really nice sable hair, which is what the best brushes are made out of. And I tried to use it, and the brush would not and could not take a point. It was kind of embarrassing. I couldn't do anything precise with it. And it's like, it's supposed to be a $15, $20 brush. The ones, if you want to know what like the top end is for miniature painting brushes, generally people will recommend Winsor & Newton Series 7, but those are like $20, $25 a brush, and that's way too much when you're starting out. But yeah, the Army Painter Kolinsky Sable brushes, just, they didn't do it for me. I let a friend use it who's not as into the painting aspect as I am, and he immediately kind of pulled a face and went, oh no, and gave it back to me because it couldn't do anything. So the rest of their brushes, though, I've not really had a problem with Army Painter's brushes. I will let you know that their paints aren't that great. They're very thin and buttery, and so that means they don't get a lot of coverage, and you kind of have to paint on a ton of layers. And unless you do it just right, it really ends up being streaky and chalky looking, which is not a good look for a mini. And I used to be like a fairly staunch defender of Army Painter because it's what I started with. Hey Tabiko, how's it going? I've bought so many trash brushes because I tried painting like on paper as well, and man, some of the cheap ones are not great. Yeah, don't get me wrong, not all cheap brushes are good either. You really do get what you pay for with some of those. But, I've had some decent success with some of the cheaper artificial brushes from the Michaels, which is a hobby store in the United States. Okay, I'm gonna stop messing around with that. And you can actually kind of see it on here. On the shoulder pad, you see how like the is quick setting glue better? It's fine, but Tamiya thin paint or thin cement, thin coat is the best you can get. One moment. I've got like, this is what it looks like. Tamiya extra thin cement. It's plastic cement, and it, like I said, it melts the plastic on contact just a little bit, and then you can push it up against other melted plastic when you're putting the joints together, and it fuses them. And at the same time, though, it doesn't like stick to your hands. So if you get it on your hands, you're not going to have it stuck to your fingers. I think a bottle like this is about 10 US dollars, and it takes a long time to go through this. In the meantime, you have something like Gorilla Glue, which is I think 8 or 9 US dollars. So you're paying a little bit more for something that'll last you a lot longer and has far better control when you're putting the minis together. I wish I had a mini to show you that with right now. I think that's the same stuff they use for airbrush cleaners. I think so too. I know Tamiya does have airbrush cleaner. I've been using this stuff. This is Medea airbrush cleaner because it was what I found at my store, and it's fine, I guess. Yeah, Tamiya is not that expensive if at all. It's very much worth the money. It's one of the few like name brand things I would just immediately recommend when you're starting out because it makes life so much easier. But actual brush cleaner, you need that stuff too because it'll keep your brushes straight and clean and with a good tip. And you can't really overestimate how good having a good tip to your brush is when you're painting. Am I getting some notifications on the Discord? What have we got going on here? Oh no, that's from the One Page Rules community. I don't care about them right now. Okay. So yeah, this guy now has a pretty decent base on him for everything except for the robe, because I'm still not sure what color I'm gonna make it. But I can start painting the other stuff now, I suppose. Let's go ahead and work our way up with the silver, shall we? Also, I hope you're not expecting that you've got to paint like this when you get your minis. I'm going way overboard with it. GW glue has a tendency to clog and run out quick. Yeah, it has that weird little like syringe tube looking thing, like a proboscis, and it runs out really quickly and it dries out really quickly. I have heard that a way you can mitigate the clogging is to put like a lighter underneath the metal tube, but it's like, why bother with that when Tamiya thin coat is just so much better, especially since they're about the same price. Something else I would say is that instead of it being like a brush on applique, it's a little thin tube, so there's a really good chance of you just using all of it. It's like, who wants to deal with that mess? It's just better to go ahead and get the other stuff. Okay. Another thing is, especially once you start getting the boxes, you're going to start seeing these beautiful, beautiful paint jobs done by the GW painters. They lie. They give you painting tips and what you should use, but those aren't the paints that they're always using. So don't feel bad if your paint job doesn't end up looking as good as the box art, because my understanding with that team is that they not only use other paints, but they also have a much more intensive method to get the level of detail that they get on their minis. So don't feel like you've got to replicate the box art when you start painting, because otherwise you're going to drive yourself nuts with like, why don't my Gloomspite gits look like the ones on the front? I'm using all the paints they told me to use. That's a great way to feel really gaslit really quick. And I actually found a version of that because a couple of the former heavy metal painters, a couple of the former guys from the Games Workshop staff, they've done like YouTube channels, and they've done some other things where they've revealed some of the secrets of their painting techniques. And they spend literal hours on some of their minis trying to get the perfect blends and the perfect shades. And they use other companies' paints on their minis. They don't just use Games Workshop stuff. The painting recommendations that they give you on the back of the box. Can I post a picture of what the paints and stuff I have on the Discord? Yeah, of course. The other thing is, if you want a bright pink model, go for it. It's your model. Yes, that's also very true. That's a huge thing about this game, is they're your models. You can make them whatever color you want. You can give them whatever backstory you want. It's your model. It's your army. It's something Games Workshop used to push a lot more, but they haven't gotten away from it. They've just not talked about it as much. Make your model whatever you want it to be. Give it whatever lore you want it to have. If you want it to fit in with the current established canon that Games Workshop is coming up with in their books, that's awesome. If you don't, then, yeah, who told you? Then don't worry about it. I mean, like, I'll give you an example real quick. I did this a while ago, and I'm really proud of it. I really like the instructions on the Reaper Minis Learn to Paint kit, but that's an expensive kit, and if you aren't wanting some D&DS models, you're not wrong. I will say, though, that the kit's really good, and the Reaper paints are really good. Here we are. So, like, I realized that the dwarves from the Leagues of Votann, their base unit looked a whole lot like a high-def Among Us crewmate, and when I bought the kit, I realized that the shoulders were glued directly on at the shoulder joint, so you don't need the arms. And so I clipped off the hands at the wrist, and I just kind of glued the gun to their chests, and I made myself little Amogus crewmates. And you can see he's got like a bright pink gun. He doesn't have any arms to speak of, and he still looks pretty okay. And I don't think anyone is going to be upset at me for doing this. I also even 3D printed a custom base because I thought it would be fun. But yeah, people are like real people aren't going to care as long as you put effort into it, right? I think most people you're going to meet are just going to be happy to see that you slayed the gray and you didn't just buy a ton of minis and that were in trend that month because they're good in tournaments, and assemble them, then throw them on the table. The love of your army will be very clear to see regardless of how they're painted. You know what I mean? So, have a lot of fun. Enjoy your paint jobs. Just know you're going to get, you know, some really nice things said about them. Oh boy, things have been posted. This is one of my favorite things about starting this Twitch channel, is getting to see all the cool stuff that other people have posted. Okay, Pyro, that's what you've got. It looks like you've got a fun mix of paints there. Let's see, open in browser. Let's show the class. Capture. Doop doop. Okay, you mind if I show this on stream? Because I have an overlay where I can just like pop up the image on stream. Okay. Boop. Oh my god, that's way too big. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit smaller. So yeah, all that stuff looks pretty okay. It looks like you've got some contrast paints in there too. I'm gonna let you know right now, contrast paints work a little differently, okay? The way that they've classified their paints is very strange unless you know the terminology. So base paints are the thickest, and those are the ones that are the most opaque because they're supposed to go on first. Layering paints, layers, are a little bit thinner. They're a little bit more translucent. They go on thinner because they're supposed to kind of accentuate the base color, right? And let's see, you've got a shade. Shades are awesome because they're really, really thin. And what they do is they go in the recesses where they kind of concentrate and you get these nice, deep, rich colors. And they move away from the high spots so you don't get much of it on the high spots of the minis. And then contrast paints they were designed kind of specifically to be an easy way into miniature painting because they're a thicker version of the contrast paints in that you'll get some of the color on high spots, but the deeper into the recesses they go, the deeper it goes. So they create this nice contrast in brightness to darkness on the minis. If you give me a second, I have an army painter guy, or a guy that I painted with army painter contrasts that I can show you. And this is what it ends up looking like. Best thing in the mini painter's arsenal is definitely Nuln Oil. Yes, sir. Nuln Oil is fantastic. So you can see with this guy, I did what was called a zenithal prime. And what I did was I primed in black, and then I dry brushed over a bunch of white, like gray and white, so that he looked kind of like a statue with heavy shadows, right? And then when I put the blue contrast on, you can see where it was brighter, more of the brightness is showing through the paint. But as I go further down into the mini, because it's pooling down there, and because I wasn't shading quite as hard with the white down there, it's a lot deeper a shadow, right? And same kind of with his face. You can see that, like, in the creases it's a little bit darker, whereas in the higher spots it's a little brighter. And definitely in the back, you can see we're right in the red where the contrast paint hit it. It's, oh no, did I just reactivate it? That's funny. It's very dark, but up here it's very light. That's how contrast paints work, okay? And one of the worst things about Army Painter contrast paints is that they reactivate to water. I don't know if Games Workshop stuff does that. Actually, here's another example. This guy I hit with a contrast paint of Imperial Fist. And you can kind of see in the recesses, it became more concentrated with that yellow. And in the high spots, it was a lot brighter. Eventually, I'll wash this guy off and base him and do real things with him. But yeah, so that's how contrast paint works. And Nuln Oil, did I see Nuln Oil in there? You might not have had it on there. Nuln Oil is a shade that's just straight black, and it does a great job of creating really deep shadows. That Druchii Violet is going to do a lot of heavy lifting in your paint job, because it's going to be a great shadow for the pinks that you're going to use. So kudos on getting some good paints to go along with your paint jobs. Just know that the contrast paints are going to take a lot longer to dry, and they're not going to be of the same consistency. That yellow hurts your eyes. Yeah, I don't like it. It's not my favorite yellow. It's not my favorite way of painting Imperial Fists. I did it like once and then I stopped. And I actually saw Darcy Bono do another version of it where she used it differently, so I gave that a shot, and it ended up making the yellow way too bright compared to how I normally paint my Imperial Fists. So I've just kind of given up on it. I've got, I think, one pot of Imperial Fist contrast paint, and I don't think I'm ever going to buy it again. You also need the white spray. Yeah, Corax White, I think, is what they usually sell. I'll let you know right now, also, I would not buy the Games Workshop spray if I were you, because you can go to a hardware store or like a Walmart, and you can get a white primer spray, and it's like a quarter the price. I think Games Workshop sells their sprays for about $20, and you can get I don't remember what they're called, one of the just Walmart brand spray cans for $5. So don't feel like you need to buy official Games Workshop products for everything, okay? One moment. Yeah, like here's an example of how bright the contrast paint is compared to what I normally do. Like, this is an Imperial Fist I did a while ago. He's painted with Averland Sunset, which is a golden yellow that most people were using for the Imperial Fists for a long time. And this is one that I painted using Imperial Fist yellow, and which is the contrast paint, and I'm not really fond with how it turned out. It's like too mustardy for my liking. I kind of prefer my desaturated look that I've given to most of my models. It makes them look a little more grimdark. But yeah, just be aware that contrast paints are going to have a very strong, rich color to them. Like a McMascot. you're not wrong. He does kind of have that going about him, doesn't he? So right now, my next goal is to stop fighting this gray and just continue working on it. And you can kind of see, I was about to ask what kind of mustard y'all eating. Gray Poupon? Apparently. So you can kind of see it happening as I'm painting this guy. I know I've gotten way off the beaten path, but by just kind of very gently going up with the gray content in this dark, deep blue gray mixture, it's starting to create these really nice, like, light reflection highlights. Dijon. Then I remembered that Americans have the neon yellow mustard. Yeah, we do. We do actually have the more ruddier brown, or the more brown mustard as well. It's just that for some reason we decided we like the horrifying bright yellow one instead. And it's kind of like with the yellow cheese thing that America does. The American cheese that looks like it's radioactive. There was actually a reason for that, because I looked it up. And I thought it was kind of neat. I love looking up stories of why things are the way they are. And in most of the rest of the country, or most of the rest of the world, especially in like Europe, you guys have very neutral colored cheeses. What cheese rules? That cheese rules? American cheese? I have a love-hate relationship with it, because it definitely can be a little plasticky tasting, and that's weird to me. But at the same time, I was raised in the United States, so I'm really used to it. So do you want to know why it's that horrifying color of yellow? And this makes me laugh. I think it's very funny. You guys call them melty singles? That's pretty cool. I appreciate that it has a better name outside the United States than in the United States. Okay, there we go. Sounds interesting. That's a word I cannot pronounce. The location, Red L cheese. Leicester? That was the best way I could describe them. It's a good way to describe it. I like it. Melty singles. I'm going to start calling it that, because that's a really great way to describe American cheese. But yeah, do you want to know why the dang stuff is so yellow? It's because Leicester. Okay. Yeah, that's something that I'm never going to get used to with the British Isles and how they name things. It's because way back when they were first starting to come out with these different cheeses, specifically the American one, there were a lot of color inconsistencies. And apparently customers did not like the color inconsistencies because they thought that meant that the cheese had turned or was growing a mold, which is, of course, not good for consumption. So to make the color of the cheese more consistent, they added a ton of dye, of food coloring, that gave it a consistent, like, golden yellow color to it. And that's how it's been ever since, I suppose. And that's why something like Swiss might look pale and sickly to us, when in actuality that's what cheese is supposed to look like. Sorry the story isn't more interesting, but I still think it's neat that there's a legitimate reason why we have neon yellow cheese in the United States, and everyone else looks at us like, what is wrong with you people? From what I understand, there's a lot of weird things like that with the United States. I think there was something about how American cheese also has some of the same properties as, like, plastic. And I always found that kind of funny. Okay, let's go ahead and give the skull some shine. So now I'm just working on slowly pushing the brightness on the spots where I felt like would reflect the most light on him, right? Because his knee, his shin, foreleg bit is supposed to represent a metal. And for me to do so, I've got to make it have that, as realistic as possible light reflection coming off of it. And unfortunately, It's a very slow process. And it's one that, I've mentioned it before, you really can't do without a really good brush. So you've got to really take care of your brushes. You can't let them go real flat. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to try and do this kind of precise work. Okay. Go ahead and get some more paint on there. The tips of his spikies. And just hope and pray that my depth perception without my glasses is good enough to actually hit the part of the mini I want to hit. This has been a regular problem with me, is that I'm very nearsighted with astigmatism. So trying to hit a precise part of the mini while also keeping it in focus on the camera is like Dante Must Die mode of painting. It's very difficult for my dumb eyes. For my special eyes. Okay. And so that is how you get... The head looks a bit bumpy. His head is a bit bumpy. He's got something up there. I can't really tell because I don't think I did a good job removing the head from the sprue when I first got the lad. I think it might be like a crown, but I can't really tell. It looks like at one point maybe there was a band there, and it might actually be, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and take a risk, but he may go in and out of focus for this. Might be internal. I'm gonna go ahead and take a risk here. I don't know if you guys can still see this. I am bumping against everything, but we're gonna go ahead and make a metallic, like, half circlet going around his head. Oh no, there's definitely one there. There's definitely one there. Good catch. So this is just gonna go around his goofy little head, which I'm going to be painting over anyway. I've tried using magnifiers as well, and I can't get my eyes to focus on them adequately, so they always just end up being a big headache and a waste of time. Now my other problem is that the butt of my brush handle is hitting my light, so I have a very limited range of motion of what I can do before I hit a bump. I remember when this model first came out, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I love the fact that for some reason this Space Marine had on a cloak over his power armor, and that he was carrying this great sword into battle with him and like a lantern. I guess it was an hourglass, and I didn't realize it at the time. But I thought it was just the coolest looking model. And it makes me think that maybe I should have gone like Dark Angels or something. Okay, I don't know if I'm hitting this correctly. I might be expanding this out too far now because my hands are shaky and I can't see what I'm doing. But that looks about as good as it's gonna get. Especially since I keep hitting the dang light. And I'll probably go back and clean this up later. I'm still after that model. An hourglass? Is he gonna, your time is up before he whacks someone? Probably. Well, Red, if I see one on eBay and it's an affordable price, especially since we have so damn many of them in the United States, I'll gladly get it for you and ship it off to you. Because the Judicar is a real, or the Judiciar is a really, really neat model. To be honest, the your time is up thing, that really wouldn't surprise me with how silly 40K is in general. Like, I found out very recently the reason why Imperial Fists were considered to be like exemplars of bolters, of bolter drills and bolter skill, and it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I think I might have said it before on stream, but the long and short of it is that one of their captains got trapped in the warp and he was taken prisoner. And when he got back out, several thousand years had passed or something. And after being interrogated to make sure that he was free of warp taint and evilness, he came back to the chapter on like a scout squad. And something he noticed was that all of the soldiers had become fanatically religious, and they were constantly like praying and saying incantations and hymns before they would shoot, before they would aim, before they would reload. And he was like, that's friggin' stupid. And so he started training his scout company in staggering fire and overlapping drills and whatnot. And their kill counts and their performances just suddenly excelled because this guy wasn't wasting time, saying 15 prayers before he fired a bullet. Oh, thank you for the follow. Yeah, so I'll keep an eye out for another Judiciar red, and if I find one and he's relatively inexpensive, I'll swipe him up, and then I'll let you know about the pricing and everything. I can understand why you want this model. He is an absolute house to look at. Very, very cool model. Okay. The next thing, I suppose, is going to be the breastplate. I might need to go back over it with more white, because the more I look at it, the more I realize that he has an incredible amount on him, and more of it needs to be a lighter color. Like, maybe this was not the right color choice for him, but in for a penny, in for a pound at this point, right? And besides, if I don't like it, I can always repaint him. One of the best parts about this hobby. Okay, that looks like it's going to be okay. And let's see. I'm going to go ahead and paint over the skull. Just give it some nice little light brushies. Paint onto this plate. Now, I think I've mentioned it before, but he's supposed to basically be a chaplain, so this is all supposed to be part of his base armor. But I didn't like the look of how incredibly black he was in terms of his armor consistency. So I decided I was going to make him stand out a little more by making some of his other parts of his armor more colorful. I was looking for Lucas the Trickster, but just Kit Bashed one. That's fair. Isn't that a much, much older model? Like, I have no idea who that is. I saw him in the data cards and whatnot, but I don't know who or what Lucas the Trickster is. I don't know what army he's from, other than that he's a space marine of some kind. His name almost makes me think he's some kind of space wolf. But yeah, I've never heard of the lad. Okay, I don't even know if you guys can see what I'm doing. He's space wolves. That's kind of what I figured. It struck me as like a Loki analog. Okay. Okay, so I was right. Yeah, I definitely appreciate how they've leaned more into like the Norse culture, Norse mythology aspect more recently, over the past decade or so. Like, I really enjoyed the book Prospero Burns, because it made them out to be more than just, you know, the stereotype wolf, 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 wolf. And I thought that was really cool. It gave them a whole lot of culture. I'm leaning way too high up. I'm sorry, guys. It legitimately made the Space Wolves really cool. I did also appreciate how it explained why Bjorn the Fell-Handed became Bjorn the Fell-Handed. And it took me way too long to realize that that was the same Bjorn. I remember reading through the book and paying it no heed, because Bjorn is such a just... Getting a coffee? Very cool. Bjorn is just such a standard name for what I would consider like a Scandinavian character. And then as he's dealing with the climax of the book, he loses a hand, and it suddenly hit me that Bjorn had lost a hand. Like, Oh, Bjorn the Fell-Handed. Oh! Because, you know, incredibly important character, or incredibly well-known character. It suddenly makes sense that to become Bjorn the Fell-Handed, he had to lose a hand. The fact that he's now in a dreadnought is even funnier to me. Okay, let's go ahead and go a little lighter up with the color. And actually, what part of this should I be hitting? I think the center would be the part, the lower center maybe, would be the part where most of the light would be reflecting off of. I think? Maybe? I don't know. Once again, as I finish this guy up and I take a look at him, I'll decide whether or not the light is you know, convincing enough. I think I've mentioned it before on a stream, but my wife told me one time when I was asking her about non-metallic metal that essentially with painting, especially trying to paint more realistically, it's trying to convince your eyes to lie to you about what's going on. And so with non-metallic metal, that's a huge part of it, right? You're trying to convince your eyes that it's seeing something shiny or that it's seeing something bright, and that way it will instinctually believe that it's looking at a reflection, that it's looking at something shiny, as opposed to a piece of plastic that has just been colored in a specific pattern. So we'll see if I pull this off with any modicum of success. Now, I could have just taken the easy route, the intelligent route, and just used a metallic paint like a sane person. But no, I had to go ham with this thing. I had to try and look like I knew what I was doing. Okay, let's see. Is that a good shot? That's a good shot. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the spots that to me read as the brightest. Ignore some of the spots that the light might kind of cruise over. And it looks like down here, I might not have created enough contrast, that there's too much of a middle color there happening. So we're going to pull back a little bit. And put the dark and the light a little closer to each other. And hopefully this will read more as dark shadow versus light reflection. Because I think right here there'd be very, very little transition. Of course, maybe it would go even further than that. Maybe the light would only actually hit about right there. I don't know. I think I'm going to have to go online and look at how some actual breastplates look in the light and see if I'm even close, because I think maybe I'm even further off. I think that I should have more of the reflection be at the top and have the bottom part be more in the shade. Once again, I think that's just going to have to be a little bit more internet research on my end. So I suppose I will see. Get a little bit more brightness going on. And let's flip the guy upside down again. And continue trying to work down here on the spots in between his studs. I can't believe I'm managing to keep this relatively on camera. That kind of is impressing the heck out of me. So something I decided to do was, instead of jamming the camera right up against the model to make sure I had the largest f-stop and can get the most sharpest image, is I actually pulled the guy further away from, or pulled the camera away from the model, artificially zoomed in using Camo Studio, and then manipulated the focus point to be like the lower left corner of the camera, and that means that it should still be trying to autofocus on the center. Black ice, you think it looks like that? Yeah, it's kind of got that going for it. Again, I think I'm going to have to go online and give it a look. I will say, since it does have that heavy blue tint to it, it is kind of doing that nicely across both his knee brace and his chest plate. So I might actually keep that look going for it. Welcome back. I'm debating whether I want to keep this look or whether I want to actually go back over it, because I think having the deep blue may not have actually been the best idea since I went to a flat white. But that's okay. That's something I can fix later. Okay. Oh, I forgot to do his skull. Forgot to do the non-metallic metal on his skull. So we're going to go ahead and do some non-metallic metal on his skull. We're going to use the golden brown again, which will just kind of lightly go on all the high spots. And hopefully create an illusion of light. Because half of the skull is now engulfed in shadow. Okie dokie. Yeah, everything does have a very strong blue tint. I think I might have gone a little too hard with the ice look. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Go ahead and do it on here too, since I've already started it. Okay, a little bit more white into the mix. And again, in slightly smaller amounts near the edges. Same kind of thing. A little bit more white on the mix. Let's see if I can't do that from that side. Getting the right angles on camera is difficult. Here we go there. There we go there. And now he's got a little bit of zhuzh to him. One moment, I need to stretch my elbows out. I've got them resting a little too heavily on the desk. Okay. Okay, let's see. I'll look at that later. Okay, so I suppose the next thing would be to do his pauldron, right? Because I know, let's go back for a second. Let's back up a little bit, and let's hit some of the gold bits I did with a little bit of a lighter color, so that it'll read more as a gold, right? Because gold doesn't really read as gold unless there's a bright shine to it, which in some aspects I'm not really getting from this model yet. We're just going to add some white, some flat white, to the golden color I was using. And we're going to use it only at the highest spots where gold would white would most likely make its presence known. Light would most likely make its presence known on the model. There we go there. And this is where we get to be a little more subtle, because not the entire area is going to reflect white. Okay, let's see what that does for us. There we go. Reads a little brighter than it did a minute ago. That's all we're looking for. Same with all over this thing right here. I love the idea that important things are made out of gold, because gold is such a bad metal to make important things out of. Especially combat-y things. It's like, why do you want your stuff to break so badly? If you're not aware, gold is a very flexible metal. It's actually not very good for things like armor, swords. So most likely when they forged this, if they did forge something like this with gold, it wasn't pure gold. It had, you know, some steel in it too to help better reinforce the metal, and then they plated it in gold. That's my understanding, at least. It's been a long time since I've thought of or done anything with swords and weapons and armor. Plus, all that news may be severely outdated, because it's been like 10 years since I followed up on any scholarship for it. So, someone with more knowledge on medieval and ancient metallurgy might tell you different, because they know better. Okay, let's get some of that dark brown, mix it in here with the bone color. Because what I'm going to do now is, instead of using a shade, is I'm going to improvise my own. And what that's going to look like is a slow blend down to a dark brown shadow in between the ribbies. Now, something that I'm going to do first is color back over a spot that I just oopsed on. Okay, get back more of that dark, more of that not quite dark brown, but darker than the bone color I was using bone. Try and get it in there. And again, I don't do this part very often. I usually use the wash like a sane person. But since I'm already here, I figured I'd try something new. Let's see. And now I can go even darker into the shadow with just a regular brown. Gonna go to bed. Have a good stream, Mr. Froggy. Thank you very much, Tobecco. Have a good one. My stream's actually going to be over very soon because I need to get up and take the doggo out and feed the cats. Okay. A little bit more black. Hopefully that will do it. Let's go ahead and go back, put some more bone back in here because that got a little bit out of control. There we go. It's a potato. He is not a potato. He's a frog. At the very least, he looks like a slug. Ow, darn it. My elbow. What's been going on here? Okay. Answered that question. Nice and easy. I think for this buff, I'm just going to go ahead and hit it with a shade so that you guys can, or so that, in particular, Pyros can see what shading does for a model. So, don't know if you're still there, Pyros, but if you are, you're going to get to see how shades work. So like I mentioned before, shades are a lot thinner. They kind of run down into the deep spots of the recesses of the model. And so here's an example of that. I've got some Agrax Earth Shade, which is a dark brown shade, and you can hopefully see how the Purity Seal canvas or wrap, parchment wrap, is kind of flat looking. But if we hit it with the shade, you can start to see creases in it form, and you can start to see texture in it form, because there is now contrast between the low spots on it and the high spots on it. And in a lot of cases, you can kind of just dump the shade all over the mini and clean it up later and repaint over the spots that were too affected by it. But the beautiful part about it is now it's created depth. Same with this. This is kind of a flat-looking Purity Seal. Not that fun to look at. But again, I hit it with this brown wash, and ta-da! Now there is depth to the model. Now it looks like there's a lot more depth going on the parchment. I'm going to go ahead and hit this brown with it too, just because I've got it out. And what it can also do is if you've got multiple layers of painting, of like shadows and highlights, is it'll kind of help meld them together. And it'll help blend them all together. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do that with the belt. While I have already painted the belt, and this will darken down everything, it will also kind of give all of the colors a common shade to look or to display through, and so it'll unify it a little bit more. And that is most definitely a good thing when it comes to painting minis, because you don't, and I mean, unless it's your style, you really don't want it to look too painterly, and this will help prevent that. I'm also going to go ahead and use some Nuln Oil on the metallics that I just did. So, you know, I've got the knee, I've got the chest. If I don't like them, I'll paint over them again later, but Nuln Oil is just a black wash. It's just going to look black. And again, it's going to go in the deeper recesses and give you some very heavy looking shadow that will help make the model look a little more visually interesting. Your Druchii Violet is fantastic for this, by the way. I've only used Druchii Violet for a couple of different things, and most of it has been as a supplement for better looking muscle burn on my on some of my units, but it's a very rich, deep color, so it's going to put a lot of depth into your minis, and it's going to look great. And so what that's going to do, hopefully, is meld some of my shading layers together and make it look a little bit more unified. That being said, though, it's about time for me to go. I greatly appreciate you guys tuning in and saying, hey, what's up? But I gotta get going. I gotta feed the pets. I myself am exhausted because it's been a long week. So I will see all of you later. Thank you very much for stopping by, and have a good rest of the day, guys. Later.